Thank you very much, Kathy. Well, the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry says business leaders in South Africa are reporting favourable and positive business conditions in the country. This is according to the latest Business Confidence Index for June and July, which has recovered from the lows seen in May, a rate which was last seen 2 years ago at the height of COVID-19. Mukoki is the CEO at SACCI, and he joins me now to talk more about this good turnaround. Alan, this is a good turnaround in business confidence. Give us a breakdown of what the economic indicators are actually showing for the month of June and July according to this index.
Well, thanks, Kolani, and good evening to your listeners as well. I think that we're seeing a more positive mood. I wouldn't say that it's a major turnaround for now, purely because it's just slight green shoots, and most of that data, of course, would have happened during the time before the interest rate hikes were actually announced, and we think that that might just create a dent in terms of going forward. But car sales are up, import exports are actually up, and we're seeing a positive, a vibrant mood in terms of how businesses the future in terms of investment and growth and expansion of their own businesses. But as I said, was we look backwards, we're not looking forwards in terms of the numbers. So they have not yet factored the true impact of the last interest rate cycle increase, which is also expected to continue to increase as long as inflation is a threat to the SA economy, especially to the monetary authorities. So that's what we see at this point in time.
Alan, you've also said that these increases that we've seen, which have not been factored in when it comes to the interest rate, is actually not good for price stability. In spite of a higher cost of credit, access to credit is there for households and businesses. But you're saying this is the biggest blot or the biggest challenge that the South African economy faces when it comes to the indicators going forward?
Well, absolutely, because as you would recall, is that the monetary authorities or the central bank in South Africa has a single mandate of protecting the value of money, which is largely inflation, but other monetary authorities like the U.S. Federal Reserve also has a responsibility for full employment as well. So to the extent that you've got a contracting environment around employment and employment creation and so many people out of work, and then if you hit an interest rate hike because you are trying to control inflation, and this is the only instrument that you believe you have at your disposal as the central bank, you are actually going to create a negative sentiment and contract the economy even further, because you are trying to grow. People start getting very worried, because when you start with one, whether it's a 25% or 50 basis point, you start to worry people, and they start to wonder whether will we be in a position to afford the costs that are going to come with us. Costs generally, as you'd understand, they start to create a life of their own, because then workers start to feel the pinch in terms of whatever they are owing in the fire sector, which is finance, insurance, and real estate, because things start to get more expensive. Inflation is rising, food is more expensive. The situation with gas prices, the situation with oil prices is creating that additional pressure on the disposable income that a consumer has. In the end, you're going to start saving and skimping on the things that are not necessary, but those are the things that are driving the economy. So lots and lots of businesses are not necessarily going to be seeing the levels of revenues that they would have predicted before an adverse interest rate cycle or an adverse inflation rate cycle. So those things are going to have a very negative impact, absolutely.
And of course, I want to put you on the spot here. When I talk to a lot of people, I am talking to them to try and find out what is their, a glass, a ball showing them when it comes to what we can expect in the last two meetings of the year in September for the Reserve Bank and in November. I know there's still months to go, but what are you expecting? A combined 100 basis point, 75 basis point increase? What would you expect looking at all the indicators that you have at your disposal?
Well, you are right. It's a crystal ball thing. You know, I mean, one of our criticisms that would sometimes level, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly, the central bank is that we don't always understand the science. It seems to be, there is obviously objective elements that they would look at, but there are also very subjective elements. Because if you are very conservative in your outlook in terms of having a very, very strong anti-inflation outlook, you would tend to be, no two economists are ever going to be the same, in all fairness, right? So our friends at the Reserve Bank may well be very conservative at this point in time in terms of what they see. But if the war in Russia does not come to an end anytime soon, the pressure on energy inputs such as oil and gas is not actually going to subside, is going to increase. So that level of input that is out of your control then tends to give you a level of anxiety about what might or might not happen. I don't know whether Europe is ever going to solve the issue of that war. There were disturbing trends that we saw last night with President Biden signing in both Finland and Sweden into the NATO alliance, and it looks like people are getting hawkish instead of looking for peace. And so all those things, they come into play in terms of what the outlook is going to be going forward. South Africa is not anywhere near having very clear structural programs of how we're going to resolve our issues that are facing us around energy itself. The issue of Eskom still remains. Of course, the president has tried to open up the system for more generation power, but we still have the big elephant in the room in terms of why some experts are saying there's 15 gigs of power of assets of Eskom that are sitting which are not actually being maintained properly. So it looks like the Eskom thing is not anywhere near resolution. I think they were at NERSA the other day, and obviously asking for an adjustment and wanting to do things in a way that is very different. So we're not yet anywhere near where we ought to be in terms of really structurally changing the things that we need to be dealing with, the logistics infrastructure, whether we're exporting coal or any of our mineral resources, the infrastructure that is required to actually build the industrialization and the beneficiation of our minerals, all the issues that we're facing in the agri-space, the land expropriation ideas. So I think that until we get to a point where we can resolve those issues with a very clear plan that we can put on the table in terms of this is what we're doing to fix problem number one, this is what we're doing to fix problem, and there must be believable plans. In other words, not just talk of fighting fires. There must be something very clear, very sustainable, where there is consensus by those who are looking at that area as experts that this is actually really indeed the solution to what we're actually trying to do. So the issue around unemployment remains one of the big bogey men of South Africa at this point in time, especially that relates to youth unemployment, because it creates and it brings into the equation a very, very strong element of political instability. And we're beginning to see quite a lot of that unhappiness that's brewing all over the place, the crime going up, illegal immigration, and people trying to push back because the structure can't hold. The center isn't holding as much as it should, because when people see themselves not actually having jobs and they see other people having jobs, you start to create that conflict in the system, because there is very little that's available and so many people wanting the same thing in terms of access to those resources, whether it's jobs or whatever the case might be.
Certainly, South Africa punching below its weight there. But SACCI says the reason for that we can't accelerate our economic growth and actually put a dent on unemployment is because of that target of 25% when it comes to fixed investments that we can't seem to reach. How are we doing there, and what are we supposed to do to actually turn the situation around?
I think that we need to stop having short-term solutions to long-term problems that require a sustainable program of action. And I'm saying this very with respect to the authorities and those people who are involved. If you don't fix the issue of education, for instance, you are on a hiding next to nothing. We have to fix the issue of education in terms of affordable access to high-quality education. It's not just sending people to schools to get certificates that they can actually deploy, that they cannot deploy in the economy. So you've got to fix that particular problem. You have to fix the issue around the infrastructure, whether it's energy, whether it's water and sanitation, whether it's the rail system, so we are able to move people with fast rail networks, both people and passengers. If you're not going to be able to do that, you're not actually going to make the type of advanced projection that you are actually aiming to do. The telecoms infrastructure, a very key change instrument, because you can now access education cheaper. You can access high quality education cheaper. You don't have to have some kids sitting somewhere in Limpopo not being able to access the economics 101 or the economics 102 or the economics 302 course being given by one of the best lecturers at Wits University or UCT. So those are kinds of the options that we need to be looking at in terms of being very aggressive, reduce the cost of access to education all the way from early childhood education, all the way to the middle section, all the way to high school, all the way to university. It's an embarrassment that you can have a situation as in South Africa where there are children who actually cannot get access to higher institutions of learning because of lack of income or because of lack of money. It's not just a question of I'm going to give you money for the fees. Where are you going to stay? Where's the health issue? Because you need to have access to healthcare. You need to have access to food. Nutrition is a very key area, and creating a proper environment for students to actually succeed if they are in any of those environments. Our TVETs are not operating at the level where they ought to be operating in terms of building those intermediate skills that we can drive the industrialization that we need to do. So we do need to step back and say, let's put together a plan that is actually going to be sustainable. Whether it's going to take us 30 years, so what? Other people have actually done that. They didn't try to fight fires, do something for 2 years, and then we then end up not knowing what we're doing. So you have to fix the education. You've got to fix the infrastructure. You've got to have a very clear plan around how you want to industrialize. You have a very, very clear plan about what are we going to do about agri and agri-processing. What is our opportunity? What is the potential that we actually have? We've got some of the best soil experts and agricultural people in South Africa today.
Mr. Mukoki, that's all the time that we have for tonight. Alan Mukoki is the CEO at the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Well,